All right, let's get into it. Today, we're unpacking this fictional 2025 Alaska summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And we're going to dig into how a meeting that produced zero actual deals could still be seen as this huge geopolitical moment.
Okay, so let's dive right into the core of it, because really the whole premise here is a bit of a paradox, right? You have the first face-to-face between these two since the war in Ukraine started, and nothing gets signed. And yet the narrative is that it was a huge win for Russia. So how is that even possible? Let's break it down.
All right, so let's set the scene. It all goes down on August 15th, 2025. And the location? Super symbolic. An American airbase in Alaska, which, literally shares a border with Russia.
So let's just run through the key details. You've got the date, the location at Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base, and the two main players. The whole reason for the meeting, at least officially, was to talk about a path to peace in Ukraine. It was really staged to look like the beginning of a whole new chapter in diplomacy.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting. Because to get what happened here, you almost have to ignore what was said at the table and just look at the theater of it all. The visuals, the stagecraft, that was the real story.
And wow, the visuals that came out of Alaska were just incredibly powerful. You had Vladimir Putin, a guy, remember, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court, getting the full red carpet treatment. We're talking military honor guards, the whole 9 yards.
And that imagery? It landed with an immediate impact. AP News basically said that one scene, just that one piece of stagecraft, was enough to bring Putin right back from the cold, placing him front and center on the world's diplomatic stage.
So you can really see the two different takes on this. On one hand, you have AP News saying, hey, this puts him back in the game. But on the other, the Washington Post is saying, hold on, this is a huge gamble. They warned he might be overplaying his hand and that there could be some serious backlash down the line.
Okay, so with all that theater going on outside, what was actually discussed inside? Did they agree on anything at all?
Well, this table, based on what Reuters and AP reported, gives us a pretty clear picture. Putin came in with some really clear demands. Ukraine gives up the Donbass and forgets about ever joining NATO. Period. And the American response? Well, they apparently dropped the demand for a ceasefire and just called for immediate peace, but without committing any actual troops. Kind of vague.
So what was the end result of all this talk? After all that buildup, all that global attention, they walked away with zero. Nothing signed, no deals, no concrete agreements whatsoever. You know, when there's no actual deal, a vacuum is created, and the media and foreign policy experts rush right in to fill it, to basically decide who won and who lost.
The Financial Times, for one, did not hold back. They called it a flat-out diplomatic defeat for the U.S., and their logic was pretty simple. The U.S. side gave Putin this huge symbolic win, the legitimacy of the meeting itself, but got absolutely nothing in return. They didn't even push back on Russia's main demands.
Time magazine was thinking along the same lines, all show, no go. But they pointed out that even in a meeting with no substance, someone can win. And in this case, the big win for Russia was legitimacy on the world stage.
Then you have The Guardian, which pointed out the immediate ripple effects over in Europe. Apparently, European leaders were watching this and getting pretty nervous. They were worried it was a sign that the West was going soft on Moscow, and that fear just made them double down on their support for Ukraine. And that reaction in Europe brings us right to the bigger picture, the real-world consequences. Because even a meeting that's just symbolic can send out some serious geopolitical shockwaves.
So what was the fallout? Well, according to our sources, it was pretty big. First, European allies felt completely cut out of the loop. Second, analysts were warning that Russia just successfully expanded its sphere of influence. And maybe the biggest takeaway of all, Russia proved that you don't need a military victory to win. Sometimes a symbolic victory is enough to weaken your opponent's unity.
So, what's the bottom line here? What does it all mean when you have a summit that changes the vibe of global politics but doesn't change a single fact on the battlefield?
Right, so at the end of the day, the war itself didn't change because of this meeting. But the story around the war, that was completely reshaped. And that new narrative really worked in Putin's favor, while at the same time, it created some serious cracks in Western unity.
And that, according to the source material, is the real challenge going forward. It's no longer enough to just talk about peace. The pressure is now back on the Western alliance to come up with an actual, unified strategy to deal with this new reality.
Which leaves us with one final, and I think really important question to chew on. If a big part of the problem was that Ukraine and European allies were left out, what would have happened if President Zelensky was there? Would a three-way summit have changed this whole dynamic? It's definitely something to think about.